everyone. You're watching Hard Targets, bringing you the news from a multipolar world. My name is Teray. Welcome to the first ever live stream from this brand new YouTube channel, trying to make this a regular thing. Because we got a lot to talk about. Today, we're just going to keep it simple, keep it with one general story from the New York Times. The reason I wanted to focus on the New York Times is because, as an obvious arm of the U.S. Intelligence and U.S. Foreign policy through intelligence, any story that makes it onto the New York Times eventually gets disseminated through other mainstream media, through other news organizations, which are also acting as arms of U.S. intelligence agencies, CNN, MSNBC, even Fox News, all of them, whether they be on television or publications online. If you are a member of the mainstream media, you are a talking head for the CIA and the FBI, the very head of which is the New York Times. So getting a sense of what they are putting forth into into the cultural landscape, the conversations that they are starting can help us get ahead of any sort of psyop they want to use to astroturf a conversation about foreign policy, economics, war, that sort of thing. And today we're going to be talking about Germany and the German economy overall, especially as it relates to the war in Ukraine. Let me see if I can figure out how to share my screen here. Pro tip: before we get into this New York Times article, you don't actually have to subscribe to the New York Times to read it. There, if you have Tor browser, then you can read the New York Times for free. That's why I use Tor, is to be able to keep tabs on the New York Times. Here we go. So here is the article from the New York Times. It's part of a larger, their larger coverage of the war in Ukraine. You might have heard, whether on Twitter or on the news, this trend of European countries and the United States trying to push to send tanks to Ukraine, to put especially Leopard tanks to Ukraine. And so some background on this story is that there is a high likelihood that Russia is going to continue an initiative in the war to continue gaining more territory, to continue another advance in their special military operation. And Ukraine, at the behest of the United States and the European Union, is looking to get its main attack tanks to push back against that initiative. And Leopard tanks are a specifically German manufactured tank, and they're distributed to countries all over the world. And the biggest push right now for Germany to send Leopard tanks to Ukraine is coming from Poland. The article's Poland says permission from Germany is a secondary issue with Leopard tanks. Poland is saying that if Germany is not going to get the let out and send tanks, their own tanks, to Ukraine, then they'll just skirt around whatever red tape they have of sending their own Leopard tanks and send them to Ukraine. Because as a German-made tank, part of the business deal of buying these tanks from Germany is that you need to get their permission before you resend them somewhere else. That is in the contracts of arms importing when you buy Leopard tanks. Poland is saying it will find a way to just move around this requirement and send them anyway, which is a huge deal. Poland is kind of the wild card when it comes to just skirting decades-long foreign policy and security practices, in the EU, and once again is pushing for a major escalation of the ground war So the article goes on to say Poland's prime minister said on Monday that his government would ask Germany for permission to send German-made tanks to Ukraine, but insisted that whether Berlin approved or not, Warsaw would build a coalition of nations willing to donate some of Europe's most advanced weaponry. Quote, we'll ask for permission, but it's a secondary issue, the Polish prime minister, Mateusz Morawiecki, told reporters, according to the Polish news agency PAP. Quote, even if we ultimately don't receive permission, then despite that, we'd transfer our tanks to Ukraine together with others within a small coalition, even if Germany is not in the coalition. Now, again, this is important because it sets a precedent for what other countries are able to do in order to send Leopard tanks to Ukraine. Now, they would all need express permission from Germany. Germany has stated that they're not going to put up barriers for them to do this, but them sending their tanks first sets the precedent for other countries to do that without fear of any sort of retaliation or pushback or criticism. Poland is saying, not just to Germany, but to every other country that has these German tanks, you follow our lead in escalating this war. The article goes on to say, it was unclear when Poland, whose officials have been among the loudest voices urging the provision of Leopard 2 battle tanks to Ukraine, would formally request authorization from Germany. Poland is legally required to ask Germany, the tank's maker, for a license to re-export the tanks. The Leopards are stocked by many European countries, and Kiev sees obtaining them as crucial to its war effort ahead of fighting that is expected to intensify this spring. Germany has so far resisted sending its own Leopard tanks to Ukraine, but says that no other countries have formally asked for authorization to transfer their Leopards to Kiev. On Sunday, Annalena Baerbock, Germany's foreign minister, signaled that Berlin was open to allowing allies to send the tanks to Ukraine. She told the French channel SAI TV that Germany wouldn't stand in the way if Poland decided to send them, though she added that Warsaw had not yet asked for such authorization. Now, again, Germany understands that this is an escalation of the war, and that not only has Germany invested invested billions of dollars and lost what is equivalent of $175 billion of their economic growth, like 5% of their GDP has just gone because of what they've invested in this war. But it's also that it's, so it's not just an economic cost, but it's an escalation that this signals in one more step closer to World War III in Europe. Germany, wary of escalating the conflict with Russia, has been slower than some other European nations in sending advanced weapons to Ukraine, and has said that it would coordinate with allies, including the United States, on the provision of tanks. Washington has supplied Ukraine with an increasingly powerful array of advanced weapons, but has so far declined to send its best tank, the M1 Abrams. And we're going to get to the M1 Abrams in a second, because that is an important implication of just all of these countries sending, their weaponry to Ukraine, because that is ultimately what Ukraine is being used for. It's a boneyard for out-of-date equipment, for, especially for American equipment that is sent over to Ukraine, and we're getting footage of Ukrainian soldiers saying that these vehicles that they're being sent, the defense equipment, like anti-aircraft missiles, the tanks that are being sent, is all outmoded and not fit for operation. So Ukraine is not only a meat grinder for human lives, but is also a boneyard for outdated equipment. Now, Leopard 2 tanks are, as far as I'm aware, pretty good tanks. But the trend of sending equipment over to Ukraine still signals the move away from this as a main source of land defense. No matter how good they are, the M1 Abrams we are seeing is the replacement, is the chosen replacement. American-made tanks for German-made tanks. The New York Times goes on to say, on Sunday, the new chairman of U.S. House Foreign Affairs Committee, Michael McCall, Republican of Texas, argued on ABC's This Week that the United States should send at least one M1 Abrams to Ukraine to persuade Germany to greenlight the Leopards. one tank, as opposed to, I think it's like somewhat close to like 100 tanks that all these other European countries have and are willing to send. One tank. Ukraine's appeals for tanks and more weapons from the West have taken on greater urgency with the approach of spring, when both sides in the conflict are preparing offensives, officials have said. And Russia's recent claims to have captured the small eastern towns of Soledar and Klishivka, part of a broader push to seize the city of Bakhmut, have added to the pressure. And to be clear, Bakhmut is a lost city. If you are Ukrainian in Bakhmut, you should evacuate because Russia is going to take that city. It is lost. Like the United States mainstream media is already, and the State Department is already putting out the message that Bakhmut was never an important region. It's not strategically of value. It's the territory is lost. So the push to send tanks is to ensure that no further territory is lost, that Russia doesn't secure even more Ukrainian territory. Skipping ahead because it's they hide all the best information at the end of the article. They always do this. Another pro tip: if you ever want to get to the main juicy nugget that the mainstream media is trying to hide within their long articles, always skip to the last few paragraphs and you can see why they would publish this in the first place. The Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said on Monday that the pressure Germany was facing showed nervousness among Ukraine's allies, but he warned that Ukraine would ultimately bear the consequences of it if the West sends tanks. The main thing is that the Ukrainian people will have to pay for all these actions, for all this pseudo support, he said, according to the official agency TASS. And he's not wrong. It's the Ukrainian military, people who have provably shown that they don't want to fight this war, that are going to pay the highest cost. If you look on Twitter or Telegram channels showing footage from the Ukrainian war, like the Ukrainian military using ambulances as jump out vans to kidnap people and send them to the front lines. This push to conscript young Ukrainian men to send them to the front lines is increasing, where men have to hide in their homes. They're fearful of going outside unless they get conscripted and forced to Bakhmut, into the meat grinder. So, Dmitry Peskov is not wrong in saying that it's, the average Ukrainian citizen who pays the price when the EU and the United States wants to escalate this war, when Poland wants to escalate this war. Not to mention the German citizens who are against escalating and against tanking their own economy at the behest of the European Union and the United States. And I want to talk briefly about this secondary. I just want to skip to the end of this this other article, talk about a little bit about this reluctance, because here it is. At the end, the last paragraph saying, while Germans overwhelmingly support Ukraine in its fight, citation needed, the hesitation on sending tanks reflects the deep ambivalence in a nation that has a catastrophic history of aggression and that remains profoundly divided about being a military leader and risking a direct confrontation with Russia. Opinion polls show that half of Germans do not want to send tanks. Half of Germans don't want to send tanks, which begs the question, why is everyone else in the world bullying Germany to send these Leopard 2 tanks? There's an implication here that the New York Times is going to skip over because the mainstream media wants to obfuscate the material reality of escalation, of redistributing arms manufacturing in Europe. The New York Times is trying to make this. The New York Times is making this this push seem like a political issue, and that hesitancy on the side of the Germans is political in nature, it's ideological in nature, that they don't want to, that they don't want to go against their the this sort of a compassionate new direction that Germany has taken to push for peace and trade in the world, that they've learned their lesson after the fall of the Third Reich, that that they've become these champions of peaceful trade, and trade is the is the foundation of civilizational advance in the world, and the tragic mistake in that assumption after the evil Russians have decided to invade Ukraine, despite the efforts of of Europe and Germany to do peaceful trade. That this conflict is ideological in nature and not economic. That the hesitancy to send weaponry that is manufactured, that is upholding the German economy through its manufacturing industry, would not be a form of economic suicide. If we look at the general trend of where weapons are coming from in this war and distributed overall, like the New York Times said, the United States is looking to manufacture more Abrams tanks, and the number one competitor is going to be German Leopard tanks. There's if you look at the trends of, there we go. Let me pull up the handy dandy graphs here. I always have to come prepared with numbers. Yeah. So if you look at this chart that's been put together of number one arms exporters in the world, obviously the United States is number one, is far and away number one. It's not even close. Russia's a distant second. The United States supplies nearly 40% of the world's arms, and mostly to Saudi Arabia, Australia, and South Korea. Germany is down here at number 5, at nearly 1/10 the amount of weapons distribution, again to South Korea, Egypt, and also to the USA. France is up here at 11%. So the push to replace German equipment, the push to scrap hundreds and hundreds of tanks manufactured by Germany to send them to the Ukrainian boneyard to die, means that a necessary replacement is needed in the form of the United States, and also this wasn't mentioned too much in the article, but this is another trend: South Korean equipment. The wild thing about this table is that South Korea has had the most meteoric rise in arms manufacturing and distribution, nearly tripling, 177% increase since from 2016 to 2021. It's nearly a tripling of arms manufacturing and exporting to other countries. So the United States and South Korea poised to replace Germany as the number one manufacturer of military equipment, not just for Europe, but for the world. This will mean that Germany, who's, if you look at the table here, whose share of arms exports shrank nearly 20% from 5.4% to 4.5%, will shrink even further. And Germany will face yet another blow to its manufacturing. Obviously, the explosion, the the terrorist attack against the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, which we all know was done, at the behest of America to blow up this pipeline that supplied Germany with cheap Russian natural gas in order to sell United States natural gas to Germany at 3-4 times the cost. This was an enormous blow to the German economy and to their manufacturing industries, because cheap Russian oil and natural gas is what fuels their factories to make all of their equipment, to make their machines, their cars. And now this shift not just attacks their economy, but Germany's geopolitical standing. This is an attempt to keep the United States at the top by beating down its second largest economic competitor in the European region. Just like before World War I, just like after World War II, Germany is the biggest economy in Europe, the biggest manufacturing source of manufacturing in Europe, and therefore it makes it the biggest economic competitor in Europe to the United States. And if you are the self-imposed leader of a unipolar American world police, then you're going to enforce some prison rules and beat down the second strongest guy in the prison yard in order that everyone else falls in line. And the fact that South Korea is the new running dog of the United States to supply arms, specifically aircraft, like all of these countries in the top 10, United States, Russia, France, China, Germany, Italy, United Kingdom, South Korea, the number one armament that they're supplying is aircraft. It's all aircraft, all of it. And if you look at the right side of this table, all of the countries importing these aircraft, not just armaments in general, but aircraft, Australia, South Korea, India, China, a lot of them are countries in the Middle East, but those countries specifically, the United States sending aircraft, and then number two shipments is ships, Australia, South Korea. Whereas China is also up there in arms distribution, so being able to manufacture weapons. But Germany, where's Germany sending its equipment to? South Korea. South Korea sending it to the Philippines, to Indonesia. Be looking at who's importing a lot of these weapons. You start to notice a pattern in who is buying up weapons and who is selling them these weapons. It's all going into a concentration around the South China Sea, around control, to encircle China and specifically control airspace around the South China Sea with manufacturing to Australia. Where is this table of importers? Here we go. Yeah, number one importers of international arms. India, Australia here at number 4. What war has Australia ever been a major factor in? What conflict has Australia ever needed dozens and dozens of warplanes and warships, except in the past decade when the United States has been pushing for Australia to be its point of command for the South China Sea, to help police the region and encircle China. Same with South Korea, right on the Chinese, right like a Chinese neighbor. Same with Japan here at number 10. So this push to collapse the German economy, to collapse German influence in terms of international arms trade, is not just to escalate this conflict in Ukraine, though it is that's the short term goal, it's the short term effect to bring about World War III, a land war in the European continent, but also to bring it to a naval war in the South China Sea within the next 2 to 5 years, where it's a dialectical relationship. As German manufacturing of weapons decreases, United States and South Korean manufacturing increases. And therefore, the direction of United States foreign policy, specifically security foreign policy of controlling and encircling China, becomes more and more of a reality. This, just proving, that this conflict in Ukraine really is a preview, a testing ground of World War III. And this is echoed by other publications in the United States, like the Wall Street Journal, which I'm going to pull up the article here. But yeah, the Wall Street Journal saying that U.S. tanks should go to Taiwan. This is not an accident. Let's see. Yeah, it's well, I don't. You get the point. I'm not going to read the article, but if you go to the Wall Street Journal, they're publishing articles that say U.S. tanks should go to Taiwan over Ukraine, and like these no-name spooks working for the media, just putting out opinion piece after opinion piece of, let Europeans send their German tanks to Ukraine to die, send all of their outmoded equipment, replace it with Abrams tanks manufactured by the United States, so that the United States can continue building up armaments in Taiwan and in the South China Sea in general. Though, though what I did want to start this, following someone on Twitter who has an interesting perspective about the partition of what this means for the balance of power in Europe. And he says, Poland is building what will become one of the strongest armies in NATO. They agreed to purchase 250 Abrams tanks in early 2022, followed by another order for 116 Abrams tanks in December. Plus, they ordered 180 ROK K2 Black Panther MBTs in a multi-billion-dollar deal. So the new balance of power of international arms coming from Germany to the United States means that the United States military has a lot of profit to be made in this war in Ukraine, turning Poland into this topsy-turvy version of Germany in 1939, of building up their military in order to steamroll over Western Ukraine. Because that was one of their explicit goals. If you listen to former Ukrainian prime ministers and foreign officials, when the special military operation of Russia first started, all of these politicians in Poland were expecting the collapse of Ukraine, and should Zelensky's government have collapsed, they were planning to steamroll over the western side of Ukraine, everything that wasn't captured by Russia. This was an explicit. This was an implicit goal that was made explicit by former foreign policy politicians in Poland, and it's all being pushed by the United States in this suicidal quest to start World War III. So in addition, 820 K2PL Black Panthers are planned to be produced in Poland from 2026 onwards. Poland is just the latest example of an armed forces modernizing with American and South Korean kit rather than German. The bulk of Poland's modern MBTs are currently Leopard 2s. So again, the Polish drive, this death drive of the Polish government to escalate this conflict is is an economic strategy of replacing German equipment, to become client states of the U.S. of the U.S. military. And I like this here at the end. Arms exports are one of the handful of key indicators of global clout. So it will also be interesting to see which direction Chinese arms exports go. Their exports declined from 2017 to 2021, and here's the table that I showed you earlier. So yeah, arms exports are a big factor in who's going to be a key player on the global stage. And the New York Times wants to obfuscate that fact and make it an ideological battle rather than a material, physical, foundational economic incentive of control. There's the implications of this are disastrous. Not we can say anything we want about we support this or that politician, or we ideologically support this or that side. Though why you'd want to ideologically support Ukraine when they are run by Nazis is beyond me. Regardless of ideology, the material implications of people who are living in Europe, not to mention in China and in East Asia and Southeast Asia, when the United States is clearly gearing up for huge naval conflict in the region, like people's lives are affected by these decisions to redistribute all of these weapons. You have chatter happening in Telegram chats, saying that the implication for the German economy, going back to the bombing of the of the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, and Germany's decision to cut off natural gas and oil from Russia. Sources like Bloomberg News, saying that it'll take until 2026 for Germany to install 56 billion cubic meters of domestic liquid natural gas. So it'll take 3+ years to replace the supply that they lost, not just from sanctions, but from a terrorist attack against their supply of fuel for their economy. And the Swiss newspaper News Zürcher Zeitung highlights another aspect of Germany's refusal to supply tanks to Ukraine, the economic one. That it's as Germans give other countries the go-ahead to re-export Leopards to Ukraine, they can later be replaced by American Abrams. And I don't know if you had seen. I don't have it pulled up on Twitter, but at the beginning of the year, or rather the very end of last year, and I'll close on this because it's becoming more poignant by the day. Dmitry Medvedev, the former president of Russia, had posted on his Twitter, so you can go and actually let's see if we can find it, because it is prescient. He had been talking on his Twitter about his predictions for 2023, which were wild to read at the time. You like I was reading these, at the end of December, thinking, wow, this guy Dmitry Medvedev is a madman. I don't know where he's getting these predictions. I don't know how he could possibly think. Let's see, where is it? Apologies if you're watching this. Skip ahead like 30 seconds while I try and find these predictions. Damn it. Let's see. Yeah, I don't think I'm going to find it. Don't think I'm going to find it, which is a shame. Yeah. Anyway, yeah, I mean, I haven't pulled it up on Telegram. Yeah, his predictions for 2023 were all insane. But as you know, we're not even in February yet, and his predictions are looking more and more prescient. So he says, what could happen in 2023? And he has 10 of these. And a lot of them are related, but also tied together again to this absolute war happening between Russia and Ukraine. He says, number 2 is the return of the UK to the European Union. I want to talk about that tomorrow. I want to do another live tomorrow about, again, like I was called crazy that Britain would never roll back on Brexit, but that is the New York Times had an article today about how Britons regret Brexit and how they want to rejoin the European Union. So that's already accurate. Number 3, the collapse of the European Union after the return of the UK and the abolition of the circulation of the euro as the currency of the former EU. So the Balkanization of Europe. Number 4, capture by Poland and Hungary of the western regions of the former Ukraine. And this is not crazy. This is not him trying to foment divisions and try to divide and conquer. No, this was the express goals of Poland at the start of the special military operation to invade Ukraine. And so this is still a very high likelihood of, Poland is already mobilizing its military to the border with Ukraine. It's already got 250 Abrams tanks plus another 160, 410, over 400 tanks contracted to be sent to Poland. If Zelensky's government ever falls, that is very likely. Can't say it's certain, but they've said that that's what they wanted to do. So I can only surmise that in Ukraine's inevitable defeat, because it is inevitable that it will lead to Poland just going full, just doing what Hitler did, and at the start of World War II. Dmitry Medvedev's 5th prediction: the creation of the Fourth Reich on the basis of Germany and the satellites that joined it: Poland, the Baltic countries, the Czech Republic, Slovakia, Romania, the Kiev Republic, and other outcasts. Again, it sounds crazy. It sounds nuts. The former president of Russia just going on Twitter and saying the Fourth Reich is returning, but and it's not even just logical to think this, considering just how many Nazis are running the Ukrainian government. The return of Nazism to the European continent. But just when you look at the imminent collapse of the German economy, the cutting off of its oil supplies and natural gas supplies from Russia, which cost hundreds of billions of dollars. The escalation of the war, which is estimated to cost 175 billion. Inflation, rampant inflation in the double digits. All of these economic death spirals for the second, for the largest economy in Europe, like that death spiral does not happen peacefully. Especially when all of these satellite countries, Poland, Romania, like when these countries, Ukraine obviously has already escalated and been Nazified, but when Poland and Romania are heavily militarizing, Poland is the most aggressive, but Romania's military is also mobilizing. There's already like this conflict going on, like that of trying to come to the aid of the Nazis in Ukraine. This is what Zelensky meant when he said he wanted to turn Ukraine into the next Israel, is to draw the lines of partition of who supports the permanent war in support of Nazifying the continent and who doesn't. So Medvedev is onto something when he says that the Fourth Reich, it will, that 2023, we will see the rise of the Fourth Reich. There is a very obvious plan on the part of the United States to destroy the German economy, to absolutely gut German manufacturing, gut the German economy, take it from the fifth place weapons manufacturer to just sink it as low as it can go, so it has no competition economically. So the U.S. can become the new top dog in defining European security policy, in defining European the economy. And that didn't happen, and that didn't go so well 80 years ago, or 90 years ago, I guess, if you want to count the decade leading up to World War II. That didn't go so well after Germany lost World War I. Of trying to turn, of trying to define European economic policy by just gutting the largest economy on the continent. So the rise of the Fourth Reich, and the dawn of World War III is getting closer by the day. So when you see all of these mainstream media spooks crying about how we need to send Ukraine more tanks, how we need to stop the Russian initiative in the spring, how we need to send Zelensky more equipment to fight back those evil Russians. How dare those Russians want to denazify Ukraine? It is the, what do you call it? Not the preview, the prologue. It is the prologue to World War III. Before nukes, nukes may not even happen. It doesn't have to be nukes. The arrival of tank-driven continental land war and driving all of these satellites of Germany onto the Ukrainian border is the prologue to World War III, of a full-scale quagmire on the entire European continent. So that's why I wanted to talk about that article from the New York Times today. When you start, when you start to see it trickle down into the rest of the mainstream media mouthpieces for the State Department and for the CIA, now you know how to combat this, this trend. Obviously we want to get out of this war in Ukraine, but So we, but that doesn't mean that getting out of the war in Ukraine doesn't mean that we have to allow these other ominous trends of uh, forcing the German economy to commit suicide and bringing about a naval war in the South China Sea. We need to stop this. We need to stop this madness. Yeah, I'm gonna try to do this tomorrow. Make it a bit more concise. Bring my uh, bring all my notes together so I'm not rambling so much. I do want to talk about Brexit tomorrow. And yeah, so again, thank you for tuning in. My name is Teray. You can follow me at Hard Targets Intel on YouTube and TikTok. I also have a Telegram channel if you want to follow me on Telegram. Let me put the link for that channel in the chat. There you go. Oh, yeah, I guess since we're sharing things in the chat, I might as well put my Twitter there too. You can follow me on Twitter. It's more of a personal. That's more of a personal account at Iron Sun USA. Love it if you'd follow me there too. There you go. There, it's in the chat. Follow me on all socials. And once again, you're watching Hard Targets. Thank you for tuning in. This is Teray. News from a multipolar world. I'm out.